What is up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Courtside podcast here on the Basketball Network. I'm Caleb, and I'm joined by my good friend and co-host Connor. Connor, we're back. It's been a while, but excited to get into it. How you doing?
Doing great, man. College football season just ended. Pretty exciting. I just watched the Chiefs Bills game, so you know, doing pretty well. I know you were not going for the Chiefs in that game, but getting excited, man. We're in the middle of the NBA season. Got a lot of good stuff going on, a lot of good storylines. So I'm excited to kind of dive on in.
Yeah, football season is coming to an end. We now have the Chiefs and the Eagles. I'll be facing off in the Super Bowl, and we know what that means. It means it's all basketball after that. But today's show, we'll be talking the NBA trade deadline as that's quickly approaching here, coming up on February 6th. And then also the All-Star starters just got announced. So who were the starters? Who got snubbed? And we'll talk about our thoughts on that. But let's jump straight into the trade deadline and the biggest storylines that we have going on with that. And I think the biggest one that we're talking about today is the Jimmy Butler Miami Heat saga. Is it going to come to an end before February 6th? And for those of you that don't know, Jimmy Butler has requested a trade out of Miami, has been pretty clear on his intentions of getting out of there as soon as possible. And he's actually been suspended multiple times for the Miami Heat. 7 games originally due to comments just regarding the trade talk. And then he was suspended an additional 2 games for missing a team flight on their recent road trip. Connor, I got to hear your thoughts on this one. I feel like it's been a crazy story, but are you expecting to see Jimmy Butler out of a Miami Heat uniform come NBA trade deadline?
I'd be very surprised if he is not traded. Um, which I know the Heat obviously the Heat are wanting to get something, that's going to benefit them in the long term. But obviously, they did suspend him, which sadly does hurt their take a little bit. Teams are going to be like, well, obviously you very much don't want him, don't value him. So like, why are we going to give you a big haul in return? Plus, they're going to start talking about, well, he's a 34 years old. He has that, what is he being paid? Like $50 million over the next, each of the next, like the rest of this season and next season. I think if he opts into his player option, I believe he has one of those. Um, but yeah, it's not looking too good for either side. Um, which, well, I can talk about this later. But yeah, so that's just kind of my take on him not being on the Heat.
Yeah, it's been a rough one. I feel like we know who Jimmy Butler is with his time at the 76ers, with his time with the Timberwolves, and now with the Miami Heat. We know Jimmy Butler can be a little stubborn, and I feel like we've seen that same exact thing with Pat Riley. I mean, Pat Riley is the guy who, let LeBron go, got rid of Dwayne
Like
Wade,
Dwayne
although,
Wade.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. He came back. So Pat Riley's pretty set in his ways as well. And so those are just two opposing forces going head to head right now. So I have to agree with you. I think we're going to see Jimmy Butler out of a Miami Heat uniform come trade deadline. But the biggest question is where is he going to go? I mean, he's mentioned that he's basically open at this point to any other team in the association besides the Miami Heat. And I think he mentioned Memphis is not wanting to go there, which I felt like that was a little random as well. But I want to say the biggest place that he's wanting to go, and it seems like he's intending to go, is the Phoenix Suns. But that just seems like a whole lot of things have to turn right for him to end up as a part of the Phoenix Suns this year, don't you think?
Yeah. Which obviously, because of Butler's contract, there's not a whole lot of moves teams can make to even take him on. But the Suns, obviously, they have that Bradley Beal contract, which has been rumors. I know they've kind of been looking to move him, but big thing to note is Bradley Beal has a no trade clause. And so he can dictate exactly where he wants to go if they tell him like, hey, like we don't think this is working out, you know. But an interesting fact, back when he was still on the Wizards, Miami was his preferred destination, if I'm not mistaken. He really wanted to go to Miami. Now maybe it was because he wanted to play with Jimmy Butler. And now that he would be being traded for Jimmy Butler, not sure if he would still want to go there. But I think that is a interesting little note there.
I agree. And another thing that I was thinking of is I feel like Miami Heat in recent years have been rumored to be getting all of these players, and then it just never turns out, right? Like it was Damian Lillard before he went to Milwaukee. Miami Heat were interested in him. Kevin Durant at some point, Miami Heat were interested in. I feel like Giannis, when they were talking about is he going to stay with the Bucks, is he going to leave? Miami Heat were interested, and as you mentioned, Bradley Beal, and that's one thing that just makes me think that this might not happen, and the Miami Heat actually might be willing to let this play out for the rest of the season, is because I mean, they are not going to take back something that they don't want for Jimmy Butler. And I feel like they've shown that they're willing to stay, even if the pieces aren't right. But that comes at the Butler side as well with his distaste with the organization, because I feel like he's been asking for another star to come alongside him, and they just haven't gotten it done. So that's going to be a really interesting thing to see, and see how that plays out. But Connor, I want to hear if you could see Jimmy Butler in any other organization in the association, where do you see him ending up, and what do you think would be his best fit?
Um, so where do I want him to end up, dude? Send him back to the Timberwolves, dude. Like, just be like, yeah, well, this is all the grief you've caused us, so you're going back to where the drama all started. But I will say, I don't think that's a horrible place for him to go. With that team, he might be that veteran that those guys need right now. But realistically, um, I feel like he's probably going to Phoenix, or I think he's staying on the Heat the rest of the season. I know the Warriors were also linked to him, but the Warriors have said more than once, they're not going to blow up their roster, for short term success. Um, so I'm expecting either somehow a Suns deal works out, or he's just remaining on the Heat, and the Heat are going to have to suck it up.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. I think it's Suns or bust at this point, and ultimately, as you said, it comes on Bradley Beal's shoulders. Is he willing to waive his no trade clause and either one go to the Miami Heat, or is there a third team that's going to come along in this trade as well, where Bradley Beal is shipped off to? So that's
Yeah.
definitely an interesting one to think about.
Just one last quick question, and it's what kind of legacy do you think Jimmy Butler is going to leave? Because I will say, obviously, he had that stint in Minnesota. He had a little tiny bit of drama in Philadelphia when he left. But I feel like his legacy has always been he's the hardest worker. He dragged Miami to the championship twice. As we see with that iconic picture of him against the Lakers that one time, leaning up against the goal. Um, but now it's like, I feel like people are going to remember him as like, yeah, he was a hard worker. He went from averaging 10 points a game to being a 20-point plus per game the rest of his years. To now he's just, he's a little tantrum thrower, like everywhere he's gone, except leaving Chicago was like the only time he didn't leave with drama.
Yeah. I mean, as of right now, I feel like he's still one of the top two-way players in the league. Definitely not the top, but I mean, I would definitely put him in the top, 5 to 10 best two-way players in the league. And obviously has a proven track record in the playoffs, getting Miami to multiple finals, and being able to help a contending team. But I agree, when you take Jimmy Butler, you have to understand that you're taking on the attitude and the persona of Jimmy Butler as well. And there's a lot that comes with that, because it can be all fun and games at the beginning when you have him on your team, but when things aren't going right and he is not happy with his situation, he's going to let you know. And that's going to play out like in the locker room as well. I feel like we have seen a lot going on in the Miami Heat locker room with not only Jimmy Butler being dejected and not really tuned into what's going on, but a lot of other players you can see it's taken a toll on them as well. And honestly, this is, in my opinion, somewhat ruining the legacy of Jimmy Butler, because he was that hard worker, do it all guy, glue guy, whatever you need, he's going to get it done. And now it just seems like, as the star has gotten brighter on him, and he's continued to shine, he's kind of taking advantage of his stature in the league, and maybe hurting his legacy a little bit, in that sense as well. So I think he's going to actually end up staying on the Miami Heat. I don't think a deal is going to get done, because I don't think Bradley Beal is going to waive his no trade clause. But that's something we're going to have to see as, the trade deadline's quickly approaching here in the next week or two. I think another person though that we need to talk about when it comes to the NBA trade deadline, and maybe moving on from, is the Chicago Bulls and Zach Levine. This has been a question for the past couple of seasons. Is this the time that the Chicago Bulls are gonna move on from Zach Levine? You know, is this experiment in Chicago gonna be over? I mean, he's been there for the last 8 years, and honestly, he's been putting up pretty decent numbers. But the Chicago Bulls have been an afterthought in the league so far, especially in the East. But there are a lot of teams that are reported to be interested in Zach Levine. We've seen things like the Bucks, the Magic, the Rockets, and honestly, I mean, he is having a career year with great shooting splits, shooting over 50% from the field and over 40% from the three, averaging 24 points per game, along with about 5 rebounds and 4.5 assists. I mean, this is a great time if the Chicago Bulls are looking to sell high on Zach Levine. I think they could get something decent in return. But it's all on Chicago wanting to know, are they willing to blow it up and go into that full rebuild, which I feel like all of the NBA fans have been saying, yes, this is the time that you need to start rebuilding.
Yeah, I mean, Chicago's been stuck in this mid ground. It seems like forever. They just, just never seem to want to just completely tear it down. Which I'm not sure, just because obviously big history there with success in Chicago. Um, but sometimes you just got to be like, like the Thunder and the Rockets. You just have to let it go for a few seasons and, you know, maybe take a little. Try to get a couple of good young players and build something like that'll last for a few years instead of just, try to have this quick success. Like I feel like they just keep trying to get like band-aid after band-aid after band-aid. Um, but no, I mean, I'm right there with you, Zach Levine. This is the highest his value has been in forever. Um, I will say I'm not sure though about how he fits with other teams. I know a couple of the teams do need some offensive help. But, like, outside of him shooting and scoring, I don't know what he offers those teams, especially if you look at the Rockets, right? They have this defensive mindset, which obviously they do need offensive help most of the time, but, like, I don't know how he fits with that team, though.
The one thing I like about Zach Levine on the Rockets is right now they are getting by with just how insanely athletic they are, right? Like when they
Mhm.
get out on the break, they can score at ease. But when they are running the half court offense, I know you're a Houston fan, but it looks horrendous. I mean, I think they're
No,
like
it yeah.
25th in the league when it comes to half court offense. And that's when a guy like Zach Levine can help and he can go get a bucket. But I agree, the defensive side of things, we'll have to see. I mean, he's got all of the athletic capability in the world to be a good defender. Um, I just feel like in Chicago, it hasn't been really something he's cared about, to be completely honest. And we've seen that a lot with Zach Levine, where it's all buckets, no defense. So I think there could be a decent fit there. I think it would be really fun to see. But if it is it something that Houston's willing to give up some assets for? I don't know. But that actually would be one of the ones where I actually would really enjoy seeing Zach Levine out in Houston with a bunch of the young guys as well.
Yeah, I don't know. I think he'd be a little interesting on the Magic, though. To pair him up with Paulo and Franz Wagner, that'd be a net, like, I don't think anyone's outscoring that team, like even the Cavs, they'll give the Cavs a good run for their money on the offensive end if they can pair up those 3 dudes. What are your thoughts on the Magic?
I like the Magic as well. I think that's a really good big three. You got Zach Levine, who's a little more of a veteran presence, being in the league a lot longer than both Paolo and Franz, but his scoring capability pairs well with the Magic and what they do on the defensive end. So I like that piece as well. I think those were the two of the pieces and teams that I was most interested in, willing and hoping that they would take a shot on Zach Levine because I feel like right now we're just kind of wasting his talent in Chicago. I mean, they're not going anywhere. They're kind of in a stalemate right now. I feel like Chicago needs to make a move to start this rebuild process. And honestly, Orlando seems to be only a player or two away from, actually making a run at the Celtics and the Cavs in the East.
Yeah, no, for sure. And honestly, I feel like for the longest time they were right there, but then Paulo and Franz both went down, which they're back now. And I know Paulo's been very up and down since he's returned, but Franz, I feel like hasn't missed a beat since he came back.
Yeah, Paolo has looked great since he came back, but They actually did all right with Palo out. It seemed like one of those things where I kind of thought they were just going to start dropping and dropping, and they actually went on a little win streak, and that was mainly to Franz playing out of his mind. But agree, once Franz went down with injury and he came back, um, they just struggle from shooting. Man, like they are dead last in the league when it comes to 3 point percentage. And bringing in a guy like Zach Levine, who's having a career high year in 3 point percentage, shooting over 40% can definitely help. But that's just exactly where they need to be focusing their attention. If they're making any moves this offseason, the Magic have to get someone that can score and someone that can actually shoot. And I think that's where Zach Levine pairs well with them.
All right. Since we're bringing up where Zach Levine fits in, I just gotta ask the question: what about him going to the Warriors?
The Warriors are just giving me heartburn at this point. We're going back and forth where it's like, I don't want to blow this team up because I feel like they can put it together, but we're getting to where we're like already halfway in the season, and it just seems like we're going downhill sliding. I mean, we're the first team in NBA history that started 12-3 and then was are below 500 at some point in the season. So it seems like there has to be some move made, but you've heard it from Draymond Green, you've heard it from Steph Curry. They don't want the Warriors to completely blow up the roster to go and chase a championship. And then, once they're done, they're going to have to go into complete rebuild mode. But as a fan, and especially as a Steph Curry fan, like he only has so many good years left in this league. You got to go after someone. And I think Zach Levine could be a dude that could help a lot. It just depends how much are we giving up. I mean, are we giving up Wiggins and Kaminga? Because at that point, it's like, I don't know if he makes that much sense. But if we're only having to give up one of them and then a few other role players, I definitely think it's something that is worth visiting. And so it really just comes to what we're having to give up in order to get a Zach Levine.
See, if I'm the Warriors, I don't understand why you don't make some kind of move. Because look, I understand, Draymond and Steph said, they don't want to blow up the team just to go into a rebuild once they retire. But they're gonna retire in a couple years. Like that's not like it's not like they're not gonna go into a rebuild anyways in a couple years. So why not compete for championships with the remaining years they do have left? Is why I'm a little confused.
No, I agree, and I'm here for it. I just feel like they need to be smart when it comes to what moves they're making because, again, like parting with Andrew Wiggins and Jonathan Kuminga leaves such a big hole that has to be filled. I don't know if a guy like Zach Levine is the person that could fill that hole. Now, I think a guy like Kevin Durant, if he ever wanted to leave the Phoenix
Wait,
Suns
hold
and
on,
come
hold
back,
on, hold on, hold on. But if the Warriors, according to you, are the deepest team in the league, then why does it matter if those two guys leave?
hey, I'm talking about depth from the amount of people that play, not necessarily from what they're looking like right now. I gotta say, I'll be honest. I'll take that one from the start. The first 15
To
games,
be
the
fair, the
Golden State
first 15
Warriors
games did look really good.
look like the deepest team in the league, and then it was everyone forgot how to play basketball, and we don't know how to play defense anymore. I
Buddy
mean,
Hield forgot to shoot.
we were the top defense in the league, and now we're just looking horrible. So I think there has to be a move to make, but I do think that there might be another guy on the Bulls that the Warriors could be looking at targeting that's not named Zach Levine, and that's a Nikola Vucevic. And the reason
Mm.
I'm saying this is the Warriors just play small, and we have always played small. For a very long time, we love to play small, but at some point, we need a big that can actually do something. Kevon Looney, great rebounder. Trace Jackson Davis plays good minutes here or there. But if we can get a guy like Vooch coming in, actually able to stretch the floor and play off of, Steph Curry and Draymond Green, I think that could be someone that could really help Golden State and what they're trying to do, and especially how they're playing this year in terms of shooting. So I think Vooch is someone that we need to consider as well.
Yeah. Have you seen that video of Shaq and Draymond debating if the 2015 Golden State Warriors could guard Shaq or not? And Shaq is like, "Well, how are you gonna stop me getting the ball?" And Draymond's like, "Well, I'm gonna front guard you." And Draymond's like, "Yeah, dude, I'm like 7'4", like I can get the ball." And Shaq goes, or he said, "My wingspan's 7'4", like I can tip balls. And then Shaq goes, "Buddy, my wingspan's like 9'5", like I'm gonna get the ball." And it's just like a minute of them arguing about that. Sorry, that was just funny that you said they played small ball. But No, I mean, I'm right there with you. I think as good as small ball is, I think, the NBA just as a whole across the board has learned it's not sustainable for, an entire season. Just because like you get worn down, and I'm not even talking about over the course of the game, but just over the course of the whole season. Like as good as Draymond is, even come playoff time, and he's having to guard Anthony Davis or, he's having to guard any other center consistently, like he is going to have some wear and tear in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, unless you have prime Steph Curry, prime Klay Thompson, prime Kevin Durant, and prime
Exactly.
Draymond Green, the small ball isn't going to work all the time. And I feel like we've been seeing that in the past couple of seasons for the Golden State Warriors. You can only play Draymond Green at center for so long. And when you have these guys that are starting to dominate, like a Nikola Jokic, a Joel Embiid, and now a Victor Wembanyama. And we're seeing all these dudes that are 7 foot plus, and we're running out there with our tallest dude being a 6'7" Draymond Green, 6'7" on a good day. He might actually be a 6'6". Um, it's gonna be a struggle. So I think the Warriors do have to think about making a move. But is Zach Levine the right option? Is Nikola Vucevic the right option? I don't know, but it is something that they need to look into because right now, sitting at 11th in the West, that's not even getting you in the play in. So something's got to change. The one player I do want to talk about, or actually team, is the New Orleans Pelicans. This team
Mm.
has seemed to just continue to get hit with the injury bug time and time again, whether it's Brandon Ingram, Zion Williamson, Trey Murphy. Just go down the line of basically every player that is on the New Orleans Pelicans. They have been out for some point in time within this season. And so, Connor, I got to ask you, is this the year that we finally see Brandon Ingram get moved from the New Orleans Pelicans or even a Zion Williamson? Because that's actually been rumored as well.
I don't know, man. It's the first year with DeJounte Murray, and they have yet to see like what the entire core looks like together with him. Just because have they even all like shared the court together yet?
Maybe a handful of games, not
Yeah.
anything worth a sample size.
Like I think they like I don't know. If I'm the Pelicans, I feel like I want to wait till I see what that core actually looks like playing together. But there's also the flip side, will they ever actually get to play together, at a sustainable level? Um, but I will say to his credit, when he gets to play, Zion does look really good. Um, and I feel like there's probably no lack of suitors out there for him. I don't know, why there would be a lack of. Like when he gets to play, he is one of the, best low post players in the league. But health is a big issue for some teams. So, but I do agree with you. I think they're a very interesting team. Um, I do have a feeling if not this trade deadline, there might be some offseason moves coming for the Pelicans.
Well, for Brandon Ingram, I mean, he is becoming an unrestricted free agent at this point in time or at the end of the season. So, I mean, his contract is going to be set to expire. So that gives New Orleans a little bit of an incentive to sell him. And maybe teams are not as willing to buy because they think they might be able to get him in the offseason. But I mean, this is a guy that could definitely be a plug and play type of player on one of these championship contenders. Obviously, if the salary matches up. And I think we're seeing a lot of issues with that point for all of these players that we're mentioning, just with the new CBA that's in place and how money is a lot tighter for a lot of these teams, and nobody wants to go into the tax as much as they previously were. So I think if anyone gets moved from the Pelicans, it is a Brandon Ingram. But I agree with the Zion Williamson, DeJounte Murray thing. We haven't seen them a lot together. And Zion has looked good in the time that he short amount of games that he has played this season. I don't think we're going to see them moving on from him. But Brandon Ingram is someone that they need to start shopping, I think, because in this free agency, I don't think he's coming back to New Orleans.
Yeah, right there. I know. So a couple teams, since we're talking about the Pelicans unloading their rosters, there's a couple teams that I'm confused that have not unloaded their rosters or haven't even like started yet, and that's the Trailblazers and the Jazz. Like, why are these two teams holding on to all of their tradable assets for so long? Like, do you think we're about to see this mass like trade stuff going on with these two teams at the deadline?
I don't know if it's necessarily for, lack of trying. I truly think it's the CBA and the amount of potential assets that teams are able to one get but also have to give up is just completely different than what we've seen in past seasons. I mean, with the Trailblazers, I want to say their two or three biggest assets that they're able to give up is probably an Anthony Simons now that you have a Scoot Henderson there. Jeremy Grant is another one that's been willing and mentioned to be on the trade block, and then maybe a Robert Williams or something along those lines. Like those are probably the type of guys that they're thinking about being able to give up. But it's just when you have guys like Vucevic and Zach Levine and Ingram and all these and Jimmy Butler on this, it's like I feel like some of those pieces have to fall before an Anthony Simons or a Jeremy Grant can fall, because a lot of other teams are still trying to see what's going to happen with the big names before we can go to the Blazers. In the Jazz case, I mean, I don't know what they're doing. They should have been doing this last year. They didn't. And so now we're getting back this year and they still haven't done anything. I'm looking at Colin Sexton and John Collins as two of the biggest pieces that might be
Well,
moved. And they produce pretty well, but I agree. These teams need to start trying to shop it, but again, it might not be for lack of trying.
well, you want to talk about big names, and like I understand, I'm sure they would prefer to keep him, but like, why are they keeping Laurie Markkinen? Like, he is not lining up with their projected timeline. Like, I know he's not the oldest player, but he is getting pretty close to his late 20s. Like I don't know, like there are so many teams that could use him right now, and I think they'd get a decent haul back for him. He's a former All-Star player. Um, Also, another player that I think is kind of in that Anthony Simons and like Jeremy Grant range is Jordan Clarkson.
Mm,
I know, the Jazz fans love him. I'm sure the organization does, but I just think he would be such a good piece for a contender to have. Um, and obviously, I don't think the Jazz are really trying to win a whole lot. So why? I'm just confused, like why they're keeping players that are helping them win games.
I agree. I think the Jazz should be trying to take obviously the Thunder, route and just start trading these players for a bunch of picks. Like you don't have to bring anything
Hmm.
in because you're losing as it is.
Exactly.
Like start getting all these picks and stockpiling those. And I think for someone like a Lowry Markkinen, you can get some pretty good picks for someone like that. I agree, but I know Jordan Clarkson is dealing with a little bit of an injury right now and is set to be reevaluated sometime, I think this week or soon. So we'll see about that. But I mean, teams can always take shooting, and that's exactly what Jordan Clarkson brings, right? It's shooting and scoring, and we were just talking about a Magic team or even a Rockets team that could use some of that. So those are places that they can look. But I agree. I think the Jazz and the Trailblazers need to continue shopping to try and get rid of some of these guys and get some assets in return. But again, I think we're really just waiting for these big names and whether or not something's going to happen with them.
Yeah, for sure. Well, if I had it my way, I hope the Rockets do absolutely nothing at the trade deadline. Stay the course, trust the process. Um, yeah, I'm just gonna say the Thunder did not make a single big player move during their 2-year rebuild that they had, and I don't know why the Rockets would do anything different, because they have such good pieces. Just let them develop.
Yeah, hey, I agree. I mean, biggest moves for the Thunder were one getting Shea from the Clippers, and then I guess this
And
season
that
grabbing.
wasn't even considered a big move.
I
Like they
know
were
at the
getting
time
rid of a big player,
exactly getting rid of a Paul George,
Paul
but
George. Yeah,
now they're and then I guess bringing in Isaiah Hartenstein, but they had already arrived at that point. So I agree with
and
you on that.
yeah. And they also, like they didn't give anything up for him,
No, it's just a signing.
Like, they just signed him. I guess the biggest thing I would say is they traded Josh Giddey, but they were already good when they traded him.
Well, and you bring
Um,
in a guy like Alex Caruso, who
oh my gosh.
offensively isn't helping, but just helps bolster that defense and puts them at
Yeah.
another level, which is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, dude, them going from Caruso to Dort to Case and Wallace, like, they were giving the dude, I attended that Cavs Thunder game in OKC. Dude, those Cavs guards could not do anything. Like, oh my gosh, dude. Those 3 dudes were just hounding the Cavs that night. It was
It
crazy.
it's every guard's nightmare because you don't have any time off where you're playing the second string defender. I mean, as you mentioned, it's Dort, it's Wallace, it's Caruso, And
And,
even
like,
there are other
Shea is the
guys.
worst one, and he's, like, an average defender, like, he's not bad.
Exactly, and he's lanky, so it's like
Yes.
they don't throw any small guard they throw at you is already a good defender, and everyone else is just super long, so that always makes it harder to play against.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Shea, if you're, done with this section, the All-Star starters just got announced, not sure if you heard about that. Um, and Shea was named a starter. Obviously, I think he's the leading MVP candidate right now, so not very surprising. But just to round out the West, we got Steph Curry, Shea, LeBron James, Kevin Durant, and Nikola Jokic. What are your thoughts on this, Caleb?
You know, for the most part, I think they got it right. If I had to be completely honest, there is probably one or two guys that I really don't want to mention on this list that might have been not starter worthy. But I think the biggest thing for me is they got Shea on there, and he's from a small market team, but obviously was one of the top vote getters and front runner for the MVP right now. So they got that right. They got Jokic on there, which is second in the
I mean, there's
MVP
no
race.
other center in the West I would really put there. So,
Exactly. So, I mean, they got those 2 right, and then I really feel like the 3 through 7 or 8 spot is just kinda all over the place, and for a reminder for everybody, when it comes to all-star voting, it's, goes by player rank, fan rank, and media rank, with fan rank, coming in for 50% of the amount of votes or, how it is or calculated, and then player and media are both 25%. So, when you got a guy like LeBron James, Steph Curry, and Kevin Durant, although players rank them really high as well, they're going to get a ton of votes when it comes to the fan vote, which also helps them get put there. So I don't really have anything to argue. Obviously, I'm a Steph Curry fan, so that's one where I could see others. The one person I would have said that might have had an argument was Victor Wembanyama, and I'm interested to hear your take on it. Wembanyama has had an incredible season so far, putting up some great numbers. I think he truly had a case to go in. I would say over maybe a Kevin Durant. The only reason why with that is just for injury sake when it comes to Kevin Durant. He's dealt with a lot of injuries recently, and he was fourth in the player rank and fourth in the fan rank when it comes to the front court, but he was second in the media rank, so garnering a lot of votes when it comes to the media side of things, and was just barely behind Kevin Durant. So that was the one that I could see maybe being a little bit of a snub, but I think for the most part they got this right. What about you, Connor?
yeah, no, starters, the West did not surprise me at all. Can't even say if the East surprised me that much either. Um, Regarding the Jokic Wembanyama, I mean, look, Wembanyama is having an incredible season. He's an incredible player. He's going to be probably the best player in the league soon. Um, but his team hasn't had too much success. They're the third worst team in the West. And as winning your team winning does factor into the All-Star game, aka LaMelo Ball. Um, um, yeah, so I think that's just the biggest thing, which I'm not saying the Nuggets are the best team in the league right now, but they are better than the Spurs. And Jokic is making his team win. Without him, not that good really. And
Well,
so I think that's just
you got to remember though, it's just front court and guard. So like, I don't think
yeah,
Wemby's over Jokic by any means. I think Durant is the
yeah.
one that he might have had an edge on, and the only reason I'm saying that is because Durant was out for like 10 games for injury. So
Oh, I
Durant
think he's
plays
missed
those
15.
10 games. Yeah, like exactly.
Yeah,
That's the my only thing with it. I think personally, Wembanyama is going to be one of, if not the best players that's not in the starting lineup. Um, but for the most part, I think they got it right. So I don't have
yeah.
any big
And I
quarrels
mean,
with it.
look, he's going to be at the All-Star game, and as a second-year player, I think that's just incredible. Like, I don't think like if I's him, like obviously I'd be like, oh, like I wish I was in the starter, but like I don't think you can be mad about making the All-Star game in your second year.
True. Very true. And then, hey, we got the East, so I want to hear your opinions on that. Jalen Brunson, Donovan Mitchell are the two from the guard slot, and then you got Jason Tatum, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Karl Anthony Towns. Did you have any thoughts or snubs from that one, or anyone else that you thought might have been, worth a consideration?
I don't think this is a snub, but I know the Brunson versus Lamelo Ball was a huge discussion. Obviously, what is Lamelo averaging, like 32, 8, and 7 or something like that? Um, but it's once again, it is so important that your team actually can win games. The Hornets do not win a whole lot of games, um, especially when you see, and I feel like the Lamelo shots, like his shot attempts, have kind of come under fire recently. Which I know I talked to you just about this, like, personally. LaMelo Ball has shot almost 60 one-legged threes this year. The next person has only shot like 20. It's a pretty big difference. I'm not even sure what his shooting percentage is on. I'm sure it can't be too good, but um, yeah, I don't know. To me, that's the only, like, debatable one is, are we valuing the stats above the team success, or are we gonna value the Knicks' success over LaMelo Ball putting up empty stats right now, you know? Um, but obviously, I think the media and the players valued the winning and Jalen Brunson contributing to a winning team over LaMelo Ball.
I got a little bit of a hot take here. Not necessarily saying that he should be a starter, but thinking that he should be higher in where he is right now in terms of the weighted score when adding all these together. And that's a Cade Cunningham. So Cade Cunningham, for reference, right
Mm.
now is coming down, and he's sixth in Eastern Conference guards in the All Star voting right now. And that is absolutely mind boggling to me. I mean, this dude is playing incredible right now. Right now scoring around 25 points per game. And he's averaging more assists than Jalen Brunson. Again, not saying he's starting, but he's averaging more assists at 9.5 per game and then 6.5 rebounds right now. He's got the Detroit Pistons as the sixth seed. I repeat, the sixth seed in the East, not even in the play in if the season were to end right now. Best player on that team, and he's coming in at sixth in the guards. I mean, the fact that he is behind Trey Young and Damian Lillard is crazy to me. Trey Young is having a great season. Damian Lillard, it's all about the name, in my opinion. Cade Cunningham should be top four, probably maybe top three vote getters, in my opinion, for guards in the Eastern Conference. And I think he needs some more respect.
I mean, I hate to say it, but that's kind of just what all-star games are. It's a popularity contest. As much as we hate to say it, obviously you have to be good. But we kind of touched on it in the West. There's a lot of big names, that are always going to make it. And then I hate to say this, but you play for the Pistons, you're probably not going to be a very, like, widely supported player, just because, like, Pistons have been bad for so long. No one cares about them. And yeah, no, the Pistons have been amazing. Like, what is it? I mean, it's been so long since they've had a decent team. And the fact that, Cade Cunningham has literally dragged them from being the bottom three teams for I don't know how many years now, and now, they're probably gonna be in the playoffs, I'm assuming, now at this rate. Um, I would have loved to see him in the starting lineup, but it's kind of hard to compete against arguably the best player on one of the most popular teams in the nation.
Very true. But I do think that Cade Cunningham for sure has to be in San Francisco for the All-Star game. If something
Oh, yeah.
happens and he doesn't end up there, I mean, that is going to hurt me completely. And I was surprised to see that it was the fan vote, that was really hurting him. I mean, as you mentioned, though, Detroit not as big of a market as some of these other ones, but he is getting respect from both the media and the players coming in at fifth and fourth, respectively. But just someone that I think we need to give him his flowers because when we talked at the beginning of the season about the Detroit Pistons, I mean, they were nowhere in the play-in, playoff conversation, and right now he solidly has them in at the sixth seed, and who knows, maybe they can work their way up. In my opinion, they'll probably finish in the play-in, but compared to what we thought was going to happen with this team, it's a great season for the Pistons so far.
100%. The kind of like last question I had about this, which not sure if you have more, but how many All Stars do you think the Cavs end up getting? I think personally, I think they for sure are going to get at least two, but there's kind of three that I think they could have. So I'm just kind of interested what your thoughts are.
Well, obviously we got Donovan Mitchell, so that's one.
Hmm.
The others, I think they're gonna get Evan Mobley. I I
Yeah.
I would say he's gonna be the second one. So really the last one is like, is Darius Garland making it or is Jarrett Allen making it? And if I was a betting man, I'd say at least one of them is gonna make it. So give me three. If this All-Star game was in Cleveland, give me all four. But because it's in San Francisco, Golden State, Cleveland, maybe not the biggest, loving relationship. If I had to bet, it would be 3, and the third one would be a Darius Garland.
Yeah. I think it's so funny. Do you remember when the Atlanta Hawks had four of their starters in the All-Star game with Kyle Korver only averaging like 10 points a game made it?
Oh,
I'm
yeah,
just
Kyle
saying,
Korver All-Star.
I'm not saying Kyle Korver did not deserve that, but Jared Allen deserved that so much more than Kyle Korver did that year. Like, this dude is incredible.
Hey, according to Basketball Reference at the beginning of the season, he was top 10 or top 5 in the MVP voting,
MVP
so
voting.
who knows?
Speaking of that, have you like looked at the top 10 at all recently?
I have not.
Do you know who's number 8 right now? Alperen Şengün.
In the MVP voting?
He, according to the Kia MVP ladder, he is number 8 right now in the MVP.
Hey, that's just some respect for what the Rockets have done so far,
For
right?
sure.
And outperforming everyone's expectations to this point.
I hope he makes the All-Star game.
I think he's got a pretty good shot. Right now, I believe he's top 5, top 6. He's 6th right now in the Western Conference front court. Only person I'm seeing that might give him a run for his money is a Jalen Williams from OKC. I feel
Mm.
like having Oklahoma City only have one player in the All-Star game is a bit crazy,
Yeah,
but a Houston being a 2 seed and not having anybody is crazy too.
it's crazy. Yeah, I think I will say as much as I enjoy watching the Thunder, they're my second favorite team. Jalen Williams has had one of the biggest up and down years I think I've seen anyone have. Like one night, he looks like the best player on the court, and the next night he is completely lost. So I think that's the biggest reason that could hurt Jalen Williams. Um, but to be fair, some nights Alperen Şengün looks completely lost on the offensive end sometimes, and the defensive end. He's never that good on the defensive end, but some nights he scores like 5 points, and you're just like, how is this dude averaging 20 points a game? No.
Hey, all I gotta say though is it's really exciting to see all of these young up and coming players really starting to show out, and we're starting to actually see them on these all-star fan votes. I feel like for the past couple of seasons we would get one or two, but nobody really could, get to that next level of actually receiving these votes, let alone, making the team. And now we got a bunch of players that are out here doing that. So excited to see what's to come in the rest of the All Star team and how that's going to round out. Also with the new format, which I'm sure we'll talk about before All Star Weekend, which is coming up here within the next month out in mid February. But Connor, I think that's all I had. Anything else you want to say before we jump off?
No, I'm excited. I think like we said, we're in the middle of the NBA season. Basketball is in full swing. I don't want to hear nothing about the viewership numbers. It's one of the most exciting sports, and I'm excited to see the rest of it. And also excited to see the rest of the All Stars. I think there's a lot of dudes who are making cases right now.
For sure. Well, we'll be back next week. I'm going to start trying to do these and release them every Monday morning. So make sure to stay tuned. Appreciate everybody tuning in. If you're on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. If you're on any of the podcast platforms, please give us a 5-star rating. We really appreciate it. But again, thank you for your time, and we'll see you next time on Courtside. Peace.